Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the fourth round of the Superprestige, which took place in Boom on the venue of Tomorrowland. I just said we will be discussing the Superprestige in Boom, but today is a bit of a different episode. I will be discussing the Superprestige in Boom all by myself, as Tom and Issam are both sick and Tom is still unavailable. He is still taking some time for himself, and he will be back later on this Christmas period with a couple of features, but he won't be a regular guest anymore this season. So with Tom and Issam both out ill, I will be discussing the race all by myself, so I hope you all will enjoy my opinions, and if you disagree with them, feel free to do so, because it's just an opinion in the end. Let's start by talking about the men's race. Kevin Kuhn had the fastest start, but he was quickly overtaken by Thomas Pidcock. Pidcock, who had a decent start, especially for his standards, was fourth into the field and took over very quickly. He led the pack, but he couldn't really establish a gap as Mathieu van der Poel was right on his wheel. These two riders together, however, managed to break away from the rest and open the gap. But then, as they passed the pit, Mathieu van der Poel was shouting something to his pit crew and lost focus for the following corner and crashed. He was hurt pretty badly. He had a sharp cut in his knee, blood was going out, and the first shots we saw after that were pretty worrying. He was struggling to remount his bike, he was struggling with running, he couldn't put the power on the bike, but eventually things started to improve for him, and we'll come back to where he finished in a bit. Pidcock had gone over Mathieu van der Poel, and that meant that his lead that he had established over the rest vanished. He was in a group with Lars van der Haar, Michael van Toerenhout and Eli Iserbyt, but he quickly dropped them all. Pidcock from there on was in control. He grew his gap to 30 seconds and then he just chilled, stayed in control. It became 20 seconds and then in the final lap he didn't bother too much, so he in the end won with 10 seconds. The gap behind, or the group behind, was a pretty interesting one. Lars van der Haar was facing the Bal-Saus-Bingle duo of Eli Iserbyt and Michael van Toerenhout. Van Toerenhout did a lot of work in the early phases of the race, but ultimately got dropped. Iserbyt and Van der Haar then made it a two-man battle for the second place on the podium. Van der Haar won that battle. Just after the sandpit he was quicker in his pedals and opened the gap. He did not lose that anymore and he took the second place ahead of Eli Iserbyt. Pidcock with the win today. It was a pretty boring race for me. He was in control all the time, he knew that the others wouldn't come back, so yeah, it is what it is, but it was a deserved victory for him. He was simply the strongest today. The course in Boom is a very honest course. These shorter climbs than we had in the previous year, because the course had undergone some changes, it's not perfect for Pidcock. The longer climbs, like if he goes into the Koppenberg Cross in top form, that's the race that he can do well. Namur, Gavere, those are more the races for Pidcock. This is already good for him due to the elevation there is, but let's be honest, it's not the best course for him. It's useless, in my opinion, to speculate how he would have done against Mathieu van der Poel on this course. I mean, yes, we can compare the lap times. Van der Poel, after that crash, managed to, put in the fastest lap in some laps. Sometimes he was just slower than Pidcock. But Pidcock wasn't going all out. He was in control. He knew that he didn't have to do everything. Van der Poel, in the meanwhile, he probably still had some hamper from that injury that he sustained from that crash. And he was in the background. We don't know how many backmarkers he faced. We don't know if he was even going all out, because in the interview after the race, he said, I lost attention. I lost my focus for the corner because I was still busy telling the people in the pit crew something, and then I misjudged the corner. To me, it looked that in the corner he started pedaling too quickly. As soon as he came in the middle of the corner, he put down his power and then he just let his back wheel slip due to that. That's something you can't compensate on slippery cobbles, and he went down. A pretty rare mistake, especially for Mathieu van der Poel, but those things happen. After that, Van der Poel said he continued to just get the stiffness out of his leg, which was a wise decision because I think his knee was locked after the crash. When he was trying to remount, that's a shot we saw, he, missed his saddle. He couldn't get his knee high enough, he couldn't jump. It was definitely hurt, but he said in the end he felt okay. He's going to be starting in Antwerp tomorrow, and he said he was surprised by how fast his lap times were. I can understand that because it looked pretty bad in the beginning, but he managed to keep going again. So overall, a lot less worrying because at the moment of the crash, well, we were already getting scared. Hopefully not another winter without Mathieu van der Poel. Hopefully improvement. And, well, it improved, so he can be happy. Or, well, happy. I don't think he will be that happy because you don't want to crash, of course. But it's better than what it initially looked like. And that's the positive he can take. He will probably be there tomorrow. Although, a bit of a side note on tomorrow's race in Antwerp. Usually, the day after the crash or the 2 days after the crash, those days are the toughest for your body. It's the hardest. The stiffness starts kicking in. But because Van der Poel is such an athlete that he continues and is immediately thinking about recovery, he will probably have less effect of that crash tomorrow than if he would have withdrawn and then sit in his camper van watching the World Championship football, watching the Netherlands play, which we know he follows. Then he would have had a lot more issues with that tomorrow in Antwerp. So for now, I would think he will be fine, especially because in the interview he was already super confident that he would be starting and how things improved. He will be there tomorrow. Pidcock tomorrow, well, I don't want to repeat really what we said in the preview podcast. Course is not really something for him. Although, I saw an onboard lap. Let's not over-exaggerate in how important the sand will be. It doesn't look that decisive tomorrow. There's this very long sand passage just before the finish. That could be something he struggles in. But overall, it's not looking to be super decisive. There's some small patches. They look relatively easy. And then there's this super long passage towards the end of the lap. And there it's a bit ruined because they have barriers. And these barriers, the riders can just drag themselves along these barriers if the spectators allow that at least. And then it kind of takes away the effect of having a long sand passage there. It really ruins it for me. That's something they should look into changing because, yeah, it's always annoying, at least. I find it annoying. Riders, of course, it makes sense, they do it. And if you put a punishment on it, they will probably still do it because they are cyclists. They try those things. They try to take the corner as sharp as possible, and if there's the possibility to cut the corner, they will do it, just like racing drivers. But it is what it is. Today, Pidcock was just simply the best, the strongest. Well, of course, you could add, what about Van der Poel? Van der Poel made a mistake, so let's exclude Van der Poel. Out of the riders that finished in the front, Pidcock was the best. So he deserved that victory. Second win of the season. And I saw a stat on Twitter that he was the, I think, only 5th or 6th non-Dutch or Belgian rider to win 5 classified races. And the last one who did that was Davide Bramati. He did it all in one season in 1996. So that's definitely a while ago. Good to see somebody, well, refreshing that stat for us. Let's look at the battle for a second then. Van der Haar, Iserbyt and Van Toerenhout. Van Toerenhout and Iserbyt both didn't have the best starts. Managed to get into the race again. And, well, the Paalshuis duo, they were pacing hard throughout the race. Mainly for the GC because Sweek had an even worse start. And I can understand that decision because you knew Pidcock was gone. You knew you wouldn't be catching him. So what was left? Second place and the classification. They went for it, and Van der Haar, he sat in the wheel and he said himself already in the interview, maybe it was not the nicest thing I could have done. Iserbyt said he was annoyed by that in the post-race interview. I can understand both riders. If you are Van der Haar, why would you ride? There's 2 riders from one team. They are known for pulling out team tactics. They are already pacing for the classification. Why do some work? If you're Iserbyt, I can understand your position. Van der Haar is actually the winner out of all of this. Van der Haar now is the joint leader of the Superprestige. He takes away points. Why doesn't Van der Haar also pace for his GC? I can understand both riders, their tactics and their frustrations, but overall, I think Iserbyt also didn't do all too much work. It looked to be Van Toerenhout pulling throughout most of the race, and for Iserbyt the signs are actually promising. I read an interview this week that he said that his situation with his knee is improving and his back. He said that he, rides with power meters in his pedals, and that there was a huge disbalance, that his left foot was seriously, I think it was 42% power output compared to 58%. And be aware, normally they should be if it's 49-51, it's already a relatively significant disbalance. So that was a huge disbalance. He said that this is now improving, that he's now at 45.55, which is still super big, 10% difference. It might be exaggerated a little bit, but still, it's a big disbalance. Things on his side seem to be improving again. We saw some promising signs last weekend already. This weekend, more improvement on his side. He seems to be getting on the right end of things again. I'm interested to see what he decides after Antwerp. He said that he might skip Dublin and Val di Sole to take a bit of rest. At this moment, I doubt it, to be honest. He's still in that World Cup classification. Sure, tomorrow, if it goes terribly, he might lose 20 points on Zweek. And then he might think, well, I'm not closing 20 points. I'm going to call it a day in the World Cup, focus on Superprestige, where he's now back in the classification. Focus on the X2O trophy, which he is leading. Those are the things for Iserbyt that he would then focus on. But as things stand now, I think he will race Antwerp tomorrow. He will do fine, and then race Dublin and Val di Sole. So, yeah, that's the situation for Iserbyt. Things are improving on his end. Let's look at the entire top 10 then. Tom Pidcock with the win ahead of Van der Haar and Iserbyt. 4th place for Michael van Toerenhout ahead of Laurens Zweek, Ryan Kamp and Jens Adams, who claims 7th. 8th place for Kevin Kuhn ahead of Jente Michels, and the 10th place goes to Niels van der Putte. Michael van Toerenhout in 4th place. Briefly discussing him, I thought that, well, his race was not disappointing because the course today was maybe a bit too fast for him, but with the elevation I would have expected him to do a little bit more. However, as said earlier, he did a lot of work for the GC, and that seemed to pay off because, yes, well, in Merckxplas there was this story, Van Toerenhout is stealing points for Iserbyt, does he believe in his own classification? I don't think the Superprestige is the classification for Van Toerenhout. Things did not go too well so far in the Superprestige for him. I mean, he's definitely up there in the classifications because he is 4th at the moment, but already before today his deficit on Zweek was, I think, 7 points before today. That's not in the Superprestige because you miss 1 point. His season didn't start too well, or a Superprestige season in Ruddervoorde, where he only scored 11 points, and then if you lose 2 more points with 2 third places, it already starts ticking up. The Superprestige is still super close though, because Zweek and Van der Haar are equal on points. Iserbyt is only 3 points behind, so Van Toerenhout definitely today with a better Iserbyt was able to sacrifice his own race and doing some work to keep Zweek behind, and that worked. And for Zweek, well, after a disappointing start, a 5th place, I think it's not what he had hoped for, but this is also not a course for Laurens Zweek. It's too much elevation. He's a big guy, he's a big man, he has wide shoulders, he's muscular. It's not something he excels in. So yeah, 5th place. I think he would have wanted a 4th or maybe even a 3rd place, but on the other hand, his focus is on tomorrow. World Cup for him is more important than the Superprestige, and tomorrow, let's face it, he should be the one coming closest to Pidcock, Van Aert and Van der Poel, because the Sandman, yes, sand does not look to be the decisive factor, but with how Zweek has been handling the sand this season, even those small sections can make differences. And of course, we don't know how the conditions will be like tomorrow, because there is apparently going to be some frost overnight. That could make the sand complicated. We'll see tomorrow. Some other names in the top 10. I thought that Ryan Kamp and Jente Michels both had excellent races. Especially Ryan Kamp, a 6th place, is a continuation of his current form, because yes, we know that the talent is there. 2 seasons ago, when he was eventually beaten at the Under-23 World Championships in Ostend, he was already super good then, getting good results. But now he's really on it. That 5th place in Merckxplas, then a decent result in Overijse. Last week, DNF in Hulst. I do not know the reason, but his form has been building. He started off with some of these smaller races, first top 10s in Cyclocross races, then raced in Spain, Oosterwijk taking wins, just outside of the top 10 in Tabor, Ruddervoorde, Namur, and then, well, Namur was of course already a showing of his form and potential talent, because he was running super well until he crashed and faded, but now in terms of results it's also coming out. The 8th in Beekse Bergen, 5th in Merckxplas, and today 6th. good result for him, and for Jente Michels we can only say the same. Michels was running in 7th at some point, actually just behind Kamp, faded a bit in the final lap, but I do have to say this is a good course for Jente Michels. A 23 rider, but excels on climbing courses. He's also doing pretty decent on the mountain bike, I think. So yeah, that's pretty good for Jente Michels, the young Belgian on the Alpes in the Koning team. Kuhn and Adams and Van der Putten, all usual suspects in the top 10. A name missing, Joris Nieuwenhuis. Would have expected him in the top 10, but it can't be a party every week, so we'll see. Tomorrow already in Antwerp, and else he secured himself of a top 50 spot, so he will be in the top 50 for Dublin, and Val di Sole, he can start those races. Van der Poel 13th, already mentioned him. Final note on him, I thought it was pretty shocking that he was already in the top 50 of the UCI rankings after Hulst. One World Cup win and the second place, which is all the points he gathered. Second in Dendermonde last year, and the win in Hulst. To me, it's pretty shocking that 2 of those results are already enough to get you in the top 50 of the UCI rankings. Maybe it's something that should be reconsidered to balance the playing field, because the World Cup is pretty overpowered in terms of points. It makes it so difficult to actually get into that top 50 and get automatic qualification for the World Cups. I can understand Flanders Classics want to have the World Cup be important and have that also have its effect on the rankings, that everybody should do the World Cup for the points, but it makes it pretty difficult for riders to break into that top 50 and secure themselves of a starting spot. On the other hand, you could argue it's a bit of a non-issue. Van der Poel and Nieuwenhuis are the exceptions, and if you are from a smaller country and looking to get points for top 50, you would probably get a wildcard from your national federation anyway. Let's go and talk about the women's race then. Blanka Vas had the fastest start in the women's race, but she was quickly overtaken by Shirin Van Anrooij, who was doing her first double weekend of the season. Van Anrooij opened the gap. She was eventually called again, and that meant that we went to a situation with 4 leaders: Van Anrooij, Blanka Vas, Denise Betsema and Inge van der Heijden. Somebody who was not in that front group was Aniek van Alphen. She was in the second group together with Superprestige leader Sein do Carmen Alvarado. At the front of the race, Vas was attacking, Van Anrooij was attacking, and Betsema was sitting in. Vas and Van Anrooij both blew up and dropped back. That was for the first time that we saw Aniek van Alphen storming through the field. She overtook her 777 teammate Inge van der Heijden. Then she overtook Blanka Vas. She overtook Shirin van Anrooij and found herself in second. Denise Betsema at that point was leading the race, but got a puncture. A rear puncture meant that Aniek van Alphen out of nowhere was leading the race, purely based on a faster pace than the other riders. Betsema, however, was not done that quickly. Betsema wanted the win today, and she tried everything she could. She closed that gap on Van Alphen pretty quickly, and the duo went into the final lap together. Betsema tried to attack at some point. She sat in on Van Alphen on the hills, tried to attack after that, and she looked to crack Van Alphen. But Van Alphen had one weapon that Betsema didn't have: the barriers. Aniek van Alphen bunny hopped the barriers, put a sprint after that, closed the 2-second gap Betsema had, and absolutely sent it down the inside towards the sandpit. Betsema did not see that coming. Van Alphen led through the sand, remounted first, and it went down to a sprint. In the sprint, Aniek van Alphen took the win, just ahead of Denise Betsema. Behind that, Shirin van Anrooij claimed third. I have to say that this win by Aniek van Alphen completely took me by surprise. I at no point saw it coming that Aniek van Alphen would be winning a classified cross. Sure, the potential has been there. I would not even say the potential to win a classified cross has been there. We know that 2 seasons ago, yes, she claimed a silver medal at the Under-23 World Championships in Ostend. But to me, that had always seemed like a lucky shot. She was a rider that was always at the back ends of the top 10, consistent, but not a winner. We have of course saw that she had a very good race in Overijse. So I tend to say the climbing courses suit her, and I stand by that, because in 2020 she already got, I think, a 6th place on the Koppenberg from the top of my head. So these type of things show that a course like Boom should suit her, but to then take on Vas. Okay, Vas came from a training camp in the United States with SD Works. Maybe she wasn't the freshest and a big roadblock is not the ideal prep. Okay, but Van Anrooij has been very good, and then you could still say, well, Van Anrooij, she crashed in the pre-ride of Hulst and was actually thinking about not starting the race. But she still ended third in that race. Van Anrooij is on good form. Betsema today, she almost put in the flawless race. I mean, she was unlucky with that puncture. Sure, we have to factor that in. Betsema maybe would have won without the puncture. But even a second place would have been a huge prize to me, because she only won the Rapecross Logeren, which was an Etias cross in 2020. That's the only televised cross she won. And for the rest, to me, there was nothing that really indicated such a result as this. Last season it was a bit out and about, and it was more of the same, like back end top 10, top 15s. And then, sure, at the end of the season, after the World Championships, which she didn't race, she gets a podium in Maldegem, gets a couple of top 5s, but those races are not really factors. Like, most riders that race there don't race them with the intention of, whoa, I need to be good. Tiredness is kicking in, and it gives the opportunity to riders to surprise. But today, just fair and square, she deserved that win. Yeah, she deserved that win. Despite the puncture of Betsema, she deserved it for the way she finished it off. And key to her win was, besides her climbing ability, which was good today, was her technique. There was this one muddy part of the course, which was a bit downhill. Remember, in the penultimate lap, she's taking an alternative line. She's cutting in wide, avoiding the deep rut, really extreme, looking for the green, looking for the grass. She was, I think, the only one I saw it doing, at least. She was taking alternative lines, and they worked perfect for her. In the final lap, okay, maybe she didn't, but then another technical skill she had, the barriers. It really made a difference for her. If she was running that barriers, Betsema would have won. Now she comes from behind, and I'm not even going to say it's a big mistake by Betsema that she puts the door open for Van Alphen to dive in before the sandpit. It's maybe a bit naive by Betsema, but Betsema thought, oh, okay, I have a gap, I can go. But Van Alphen gave it her everything and really surprised Betsema. And sure, if Betsema would have had a bit more awareness, she might have looked back, but I don't really blame her for it, because Van Alphen came from so far back. Yeah, it's hard. The only mistake Betsema really made in that final lap, because she sat in, she let Van Alphen do the work, was start the sprint in a too big gear. I think she was 2 gears too big. Like, when she starts accelerating out of that final corner, it takes so much time for her to get her cadence up, and she comes close to Van Alphen, but then falls short. She just runs out of road to pass her. If she's in 2 smaller gears, she has a bit more punch and can try to outsprint Van Alphen. It's a short sprint, so you need that punch. Now it didn't work out. Minor mistake by Betsema, potentially big results, but Van Alphen, Betsema, they made a really good race for it, and Betsema always kept fighting. It takes quite the mentality to, after a puncture, which she had, and being knocked from the race lead to 3rd place, it takes quite the mental state to repack yourself, to tell yourself, okay, I'm going to keep going. And that's what Betsema did. So, yeah, well, it's maybe not the result she'd hoped for. And last week we were kind of joking about her and the overall classification of the X2O trophy. But today she was also talking about the classification, and today she had all right to do so, because she had a very good day. She took 5 points on Alvarado today, and they were equal on points before. 5 points for the Superprestige, it's huge. Alvarado had an off day. She was 7th in the end, and that's something you cannot permit yourself in the Superprestige. I mean, there's 4 races left. She needs to take 5 points, which means at some point she will need to get a rider between herself and Betsema. Betsema now has it in her own hands. If she finishes behind Alvarado every single race, she wins the Superprestige. It's a very good day for her, so it's something that she can still get some sort of satisfied feeling from, and it fits to what we said in the preview podcast for Antwerp. Yes, Betsema's results in the World Cups have been out and about, but in the non-World Cup races, she's doing fine. Today, more proof of that. Now let's hope that she can carry that on to tomorrow. Then, 3rd and 4th place, Van Anrooij and Blanka Vas. I already went over them. I think especially Van Anrooij was kinda disappointing. I had expected a bit more. Van Anrooij said that in the beginning of the race she was attacking and blew up a bit, same with Blanka Vas. I do agree with that assessment to an extent. Van Anrooij did blow up, Blanka Vas did also blow up, but I also think they simply weren't a match today for Van Alphen and Betsema. In the final lap, especially Van Anrooij, who was still at like 12-ish, 15-ish seconds going into the final lap, knew that the win wasn't there, so she just rolled in, lost 15 more seconds in that final lap. That's fine, but yeah, it's still. I thought that Van Anrooij would have been in a bit of better form, but who knows what she can do tomorrow. I mean, maybe she got surprised that she had such a good start, got ahead of herself, and if you go over your maximum and really need to find your second breath, then it's going to be very tough to get the going again. So hard. Hopefully a lesson learned for her that she needs to pace herself better if she thinks that that's really the issue. She probably knows that better than I do, because she has already seen her watch and her heart rate throughout the race, so she probably knew, oh, I went too deep, I paid the price. So, well, still, I would have expected more, but it is what it is. And for Vas, yeah, I already said it, she came back from the training camp of SD Works in the United States, so jet lag, training on the road, big block. It's not the ideal prep for a race like Boom, not for a cyclocross race in general, so I'm not looking into that too much. Let's look at the rest of the top 10. Full Dutch podium with Van Alphen, Betsema and Van Anrooij. 4th place for Blanka Vas ahead of Inge van der Heijden. Aniek in 6th ahead of Seonderkamp and Alvarado. Then 8th place for Alicia Frank ahead of Amandie Foucounet and Manon Bakker. I would like to point out Seonderkamp and Alvarado first. 7th, disappointing. Won the 2 previous Superprestige races, was looking for 3 in a row, was looking to consolidate her lead because she was only equal in points with Betsema before the race, then had a bad day. I think that she said in the pre-race interview that she wasn't too happy with the changes made to the course either, and probably these steep banks that they had were not the best course for Alvarado. Still, 7th is way below what she's capable of. I think today was an off day in combination with the course. Maybe a bit of a mental disappointment as well when she arrived and saw a different course than what she had expected based on previous years. That might be the issue for her. Off day, things happen, but it will be tough for her to win the Superprestige now. But then again, not impossible, because if you are able to place 2 or 3 riders between yourself and Betsema, it could be possible to fight back. Let's hope for an interesting battle between those two in the remainder of the season. 2 more riders I would like to highlight are Aniek and Alicia Frank. A 6th place for Aniek is promising. Sure, not the deepest field, but things seem to be improving on her end. Every week we see a couple of steps made. Last week we're already noticing some positive things about her in the X2O Trophy of Kortrijk. Now another step up, 6th. Not that far behind her teammate Inge van der Heijden, who has gotten a couple of podiums this season. Things look to be improving on her end. And the same goes for Alicia Frank. She made the mid-season transfer from Proximus to the Keuzer Bonnache. And we don't really know why she left Proximus that rapidly, because she joined on the 1st of November. She was then not selected for the Belgian Championships. She signed an NDA with her team and Belgian Cycling about why, so we don't know why, but definitely very mysterious. Bit of mystery around Frank, but she made that move. Today, in 8th place, she was hit hard by COVID, started her season super late due to that, only an Ardoi, needed time to rebuild. She's very open about that on her Twitter and Instagram, that COVID really hit her hard, kind of similar to what we heard from Maghalie Rochette, who's now racing in France. So, yeah, also promising to see things improve on her side, and Foucounet and Bakker in the top 10 are also 2 nice names to see there. I would like to point out that Pauline Ferrand-Prévot race, 12th place, not the best result. I would have expected the top 10 today based on her Koppenberg performance, but then again, she's only just getting started into cross again after a rest break. She's targeting the Worlds in Hoogerheide, so I imagine this is just getting some racing under the belt, trying to score a few points, and then rebuild towards Hoogerheide. World title will be tough, but never say never with Prévot. Marion Norberg-Ribeiro in 13th, also a somewhat disappointing result by her. She has been capable of better this season so far, but this course might just be too much climbing for her, and it could also always be worse because the Belgian champion Sanne Cant had a DNF today, and the same goes for Lucinda Brand. We don't know the reasons for both. For Brand, we just know she had a bad start, was outside of the top 10, and then withdrew. The story about her having an infection in her hand and that she might need to take some rest and skip. She's skipping Dublin, that was for sure. I think many riders of Baloise Trek are skipping Dublin because they will go on a training camp. Van Haar mentioned the training camp, and as the decision to make Dublin was already made, I assume that Baloise Trek will be skipping Dublin. They were supposed to be back for Val di Sole, but with Brand potentially skipping Val di Sole, I'm not too confident anymore. Brand said that she might skip Val di Sole as well to take some rest and regroup, and that she's taking some medicines that are influencing herself, antibiotica. I'm sorry, I don't exactly know the English word. I think antibiotics is the English word. So Brand's taking those influence your form, and that's definitely maybe the cause for today's DNF. So that's potentially it, but Baloise Trek, not ideal at the moment. Pim Bronhaar, who I haven't mentioned yet, didn't race the men's race because he has been sick as well and is taking some time to rest. Also no Dublin for him, which then again has to do with the training camp. They are going to Mallorca. Let's take a look at some racing in the rest of Europe. There was racing in Czech Republic, the Toy 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 Cup in Kolin. Simon Vanicek won the men's race ahead of Marek Konva and Adam Tupalik. The women's race was won by a junior woman, Vanda Dlaskova. Some of the listeners might know that she is the daughter of Petr Dlask. Teresa Vanikova ended second, and Nikola Bazhirova completed the podium in third. The fifth round of the Coupe de France, which was the final weekend of racing, the third weekend of racing, in Troyes, Gerben Kuipers took the win ahead of Clément Horny and Timon Ruek. The women's race was won by Laurine Durafou ahead of Perrine Clauzel and Magali Rochette. That will complete it then for this episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast. A very different one with just me doing the talking. I hope it was not too terrible. So we will be back tomorrow with an episode about the World Cup in Antwerp, and then I will definitely be joined with Issam. And if that won't be tomorrow, the reason is that Issam is still sick and we will postpone the recording to Monday. But I definitely won't annoy you guys with a half an hour long rant about the two races, monologues. Not really my type of thing. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will be back tomorrow with the World Cup in Antwerp. See you guys then. Goodbye.